Trade tensions between the U.S. and China are intensifying yet again ahead of President Trump's expected meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month.
Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs are complicating global trade, with critics calling them arbitrary and not based on economic reality.
After months of uneasy calm, the trade war between the United States and China has returned. Only this time, it's not about microchips or rare earths. It's happening at sea. On October 14th, both countries began charging new port fees on each other's ships, turning global waters into the newest front of economic rivalry. Nearly 80% of world trade moves across oceans, and even a small disruption can send shockwaves through supply chains. Analysts warn that these new maritime taxes could cost shipping companies more than $3.2 billion next year alone. Carriers are already rerouting vessels, ports are bracing for congestion, and investors are watching freight costs climb. What started as tariffs and export bans has now reached the docks, a direct fight over who controls the arteries of global commerce. Washington calls it protection. Beijing calls it discrimination. But underneath the politics lies something deeper. An industry China has already mastered, and America is struggling to reclaim: the business of building ships that power the modern world. China's dominance at sea wasn't built overnight. It came from years of quiet investment, state backing, and an industrial vision that never stopped expanding. In August 2025, Beijing finalized a long-planned merger between its two biggest shipbuilders, the China State Shipbuilding Corporation and the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation. The result was a single state-owned giant controlling more than $56 billion in assets, earning $18 billion in annual revenue, and employing over 200,000 people across 84 subsidiaries. That scale now dwarfs every competitor. China produced more commercial vessels in 2024 than the entire U.S. shipbuilding industry has built since World War II. According to CSIS data, Chinese yards delivered over 53% of global tonnage last year, and by early 2025 they held 62% of all future orders for merchant ships. The United States, once a maritime powerhouse, now accounts for just 0.1% of global ship production. Many of China's yards are dual use, capable of building both container ships and destroyers under the same roofs. This military-civil fusion has fueled the rapid rise of the People's Liberation Army Navy, which already commands around 370 vessels, compared with about 295 for the U.S. Navy. In the coastal cities of Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Dalian, new ships roll off the docks every week, backed by cheap financing and coordinated supply chains. As China's fleet keeps expanding, its influence reaches far beyond trade, shaping logistics, energy routes, and even security policy. And while Beijing strengthens its shipyards, Washington searches for a way to slow them down. That search soon led to an order from the White House that would change global shipping itself.
To boost our defense industrial base, we are also going to resurrect the American shipbuilding industry, including commercial shipbuilding and military shipbuilding.
In April 2025, the White House announced one of its boldest economic moves yet. Donald Trump signed Executive Order 14,269 titled Restoring America's Maritime Dominance, directing U.S. trade officials to begin imposing new port fees on October 14th, 2025. It marked the first serious attempt in decades to challenge China's grip on global shipbuilding and reassert American control over the seas. Under the order, every Chinese-owned or operated vessel must now pay $50 per ton, climbing to $140 by 2028. Ships built in China but owned by non-Chinese companies face $18 per ton or $120 per container, rising to $33 and $250 over the same period. Each vessel can be charged up to 5 times per year, effectively turning every voyage into a costly decision. Only a handful of exemptions were made, most notably for Chinese carriers transporting American liquefied petroleum gas and ethane, allowed to operate freely until December 10th. Trump framed the move as part of his promise to resurrect American shipbuilding. He unveiled plans for a new Office of Shipbuilding, promising incentives for domestic yards and new jobs for industrial workers. "We used to make ships," he declared. "We don't anymore, but we will again." Yet behind the optimism, the scale of decline was striking. The United States built fewer than 10 commercial vessels in 2024, while China produced over 1,000. American shipyards that once lined the coasts of Maine and California now survive mostly on naval contracts. Economists estimate the U.S. commercial fleet has shrunk to less than 2% of global capacity. Supporters praised the executive order as a necessary stand against Beijing's dominance. Critics warned it could backfire, raising costs for importers and deepening inflation. But Trump was determined to prove Washington could fight back, a decision that soon pushed Beijing to answer in kind. Beijing didn't wait long to respond. Just 4 days after Washington's new port fees were announced, China hit back with its own set of charges. Starting October 14th, any vessel owned, operated, built, or flagged by the United States would now pay a 400 yuan fee per net ton, about $56 for every ton of cargo. By 2028, that figure will rise to 1,120 yuan, or roughly $157 per ton, nearly matching the U.S. escalation schedule. The fees apply for up to 5 voyages a year, but China made one clever exception. Ships built in Chinese yards are exempt. Nearly half of the world's dry bulk fleet qualifies, shielding much of China's own global business from these costs. Officials in Beijing described the move as a countermeasure against what they called Washington's discriminatory maritime taxes. The Commerce Ministry warned, "If the U.S. chooses confrontation, China will see it through to the end. If it chooses dialogue, China's door remains open." State media went further, accusing Washington of violating an existing maritime transport treaty. At the same time, Beijing tightened export controls on 5 rare earth elements: holmium, erbium, thulium, europium, and ytterbium, metals essential for EVS magnets and defense systems. The announcement shook commodity markets and drew an immediate response from Donald Trump, who threatened to impose 100% tariffs on all Chinese imports starting November 1st. Then came a surprise twist. China sanctioned 5 subsidiaries of South Korea's Hanwha Ocean, accusing them of supporting U.S. investigations into Chinese shipbuilding. Hanwha's stock plunged 6%, exposing how quickly allies were being dragged into the crossfire. For Beijing, the message was unmistakable. It was ready to defend its shipyards, metals, and markets at once. And as these tit-for-tat measures collided, the world's busiest ports began to feel the first shockwaves of the escalating maritime war. The first signs of damage appeared within days of the new rules taking effect. Ships that had already left Asian ports began changing course mid-voyage to avoid U.S. harbors. Freight tracking firms recorded sudden route changes across the Pacific as carriers scrambled to minimize losses. For the world's 4th largest shipping company, COSCO, the cost was immediate, as much as $2 million per voyage on its Asia West Coast routes, which move nearly 16% of U.S.-Asia trade.
When we're thinking about a company that is sending a ship, one of these really big container ships, and let's say it has 10,000 of these containers on board, the fees right now could top $1 million. And these fees are also, let's not forget, set to increase every year through 2028.
Industry analysts estimate the world's top 10 cargo carriers could face $3.2 billion in extra port fees over the next year. Bulk carriers transporting coal, iron ore, or grain, often weighing over 200,000 tons, now face bills between $3 million and $10 million each time they dock. For smaller operators, those costs can erase an entire quarter's profit. Ports that normally handle around $200 billion in trade each year are already feeling the slowdown. Terminal operators report fewer container arrivals, and thousands of dock workers, truck drivers, and warehouse crews are seeing shifts cut. Shipping brokers describe the situation as organized chaos. Vessels being swapped out, cargoes rerouted through Canada, Mexico, or Panama just to bypass new charges. Adding to the turmoil, the U.S. imposed a 270% tariff on Chinese-built port cranes, plus annual equipment fees of up to $16 million. Many American terminals rely on those cranes for daily operations, and replacements could take years to build domestically. Freight rates on key routes, Shanghai to Los Angeles, Busan to Seattle, have already jumped by nearly 25% since mid-October. Importers warn that these costs will soon appear on store shelves, driving inflation higher. And as ships keep avoiding American ports, Washington's attempt to protect its shipyards is beginning to ripple through every link of global trade. At home, the effects of the tariff wave were immediate. Reporters covering the ports described the mood in one word: ugly.
Lorianne, what's it like at the ports right now with these tariffs?
It is ugly, Katie. We actually have a quintuple tariff hit today.
That exchange from CNBC captured the chaos unfolding on the docks as new duties struck every major sector at once. Economists echoed the phrase, calling it a quintuple tariff hit. A single day that reshaped entire industries. Timber imports were taxed 10%, unfinished lumber faced 25%, and by early 2026, those rates will climb to 30% and 50%. The price shock hit construction and furniture first. The United States imports more than $12 billion worth of raw wood annually, mostly from Canada, while more than half of its furniture comes from China, Vietnam, and Mexico. Builders warn that new homes could soon cost $10,000 to $20,000 more to finish. Retailers feel the strain too. Walmart and Target report freight costs rising 20 to 25%, forcing them to absorb part of the increase to avoid scaring off consumers. But with shipping fees and port surcharges climbing, even large chains admit they can't hold prices for long. Goldman Sachs estimates that 55% of all tariff costs will fall directly on American households by the end of the year. The political impact is building. A coalition of importers and logistics firms has filed suits challenging the legality of Trump's tariffs, arguing that invoking national security under Section 232 stretches the law beyond its limits. The Supreme Court is expected to review the issue before year-end, a decision that could reshape presidential trade powers. Meanwhile, unemployment among minority workers is rising again after hitting a historic 4.8% low 2 years earlier. As inflation bites and wages stagnate, the White House's promise to rebuild American industry is colliding with growing economic anxiety at home. Across the world's trade routes, the fallout is spreading fast. Shipping networks that move 80% of global goods are being forced to redraw their maps. Major carriers, Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, CMA-CGM, have started swapping out Chinese-built ships from their U.S. lines to avoid new fees. Others are rerouting traffic through Canadian, Mexican, or Panamanian ports, adding thousands of nautical miles and weeks of delay. Freight brokers say that by late October, detours had pushed trans-Pacific shipping costs up nearly 30%. Oil tankers are among the hardest hit. China's counterfees apply to nearly 15% of global tanker capacity, raising costs for crude and LNG deliveries to Asia. Some American owners are now selling cargo mid-route to non-Chinese buyers just to avoid docking fees, a workaround that distorts global energy flows. At the same time, Beijing's sanctions on South Korea's Hanwha Ocean have dragged allies into the conflict. Hanwha's 5 U.S.-linked subsidiaries are frozen out of Chinese contracts, and the company's shares have dropped about 6% since the announcement. The result is a maritime tax spiral, as one Athens-based broker called it, a loop of retaliatory charges trapping 2 superpowers and anyone trading between them. Port congestion is climbing, insurance premiums are rising, and logistics planners warn of possible shortages in early 2026. Yet even amid the tension, both sides hint at restraint. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent insists that dialogue remains open and the threatened 100% tariff might still be avoided. A fragile hope before Trump and Xi meet at the APEC summit in South Korea. The coming months will decide whether this new port war becomes a lasting fracture or a pause before another storm. China's shipbuilding giant, strengthened by its recent merger, now controls over 60% of future global vessel orders and can absorb higher costs far better than its rivals. The United States, in contrast, relies on fees and tariffs to defend an industry that no longer produces at scale. Markets are bracing for the next flashpoints. The Trump-Xi meeting at the APEC summit, the threatened 100% tariff set for November 1st, and the expiration of China's LPG shipping exemption in December. By 2028, both countries' port fees will more than double, cementing a permanent cost barrier across world trade. Economists warn that if tensions keep rising, global shipping rates could jump another 40% in 2026, pushing inflation higher everywhere. The world's prosperity still sails on open seas, and those waters are turning political. The trade war that began with rare earths has now reached the ports, reshaping prices, politics, and power at sea. What started as tariffs has turned into a global contest over who controls the world's shipping lanes and the industries behind them. What started as tariffs has evolved into a contest over who commands the world's shipping lanes and the industries behind them. As Trump and Xi prepare to meet, one question remains. Is this the dawn of a new Cold War at sea, or the last chance to avoid it? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe to follow how this port war unfolds.